Everybody, today I'm excited to have Chad Crandall with us. Chad is the general manager for Moby Capital. Chad, how are you today?
Excellent. How are you?
Great, great, great. Thanks for asking. Let's get started. Tell us a little bit about you and your company.
So I've been in entrepreneurship since I was about 21 years old. I've grown businesses. I've failed in business. I've put a lot of capital in myself. I was my own biggest investment. I really have a thirst for knowledge. I want to understand, and I dig deep. I really love improving myself in any way possible. I've always believed that the results you have in life are a result of you, and so I feel like I've always been my biggest investment. So I've had a lot of failures, a lot of successes, and I'm really super thankful to be here and provide any knowledge that I might have that might be helpful for someone out there.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Tell us a little bit about Moby Capital. What is it that you do? What's your focus?
Moby Capital is an alternative finance company. So what we do is we provide a different source of funding for businesses that are out there, typically small businesses, anywhere from 1 million in revenue all the way up to about 100 million. Of course, we could do a little bit bigger than that. We do uncollateralized, or non-collateralized financing. So we don't really secure assets. All we do is we put a lot of faith and hope into the business and how it performs. So we forecast on how the business is going to perform, and we actually do what we call a revenue advance as our primary product. So we look at what the business is going to do over 3 to 12 months, and then we're able to advance cash, and they pay back out of the sales going forward.
Okay. And so minimum criteria for you, business has to have been in business for a couple of years, that type of stuff, or?
Yeah, for our industry, there are people that work with startups like brand new, right out the gate. That's more equity financing than it is debt financing. We primarily focus on debt financing, so
Okay.
we don't really want to purchase a portion of your business and manage you and your business. We're not really interested in doing that. What we do is we advance capital that's needed same day. So we usually, give however much money the person needs, the business needs within a few hours. We put money in their account, and then they pay us back literally the next day. They start making payments toward the original advance.
Okay, fantastic. Now, tell me, if someone wanted to check you guys out and get more information and get in contact with you, what's the website, or how should they do that?
I think go to mobycap.com. So that's mobycap.com. That's the easiest way to get on.
Okay, perfect. How long has Moby Capital been in business?
So Mobycap started in basically 2020, and 2020 was a rough year for everyone, I think. And so really our business started taking off late 2020 after the whole pandemic situation. Of course, it was incorporated in 2019. Our owners are all, have many years of experience in this industry, owned a prior company in this industry. So their experience goes way back before even Mobycap was formed. They owned another company in the same industry. So but Mobycap formed 2020, really started seeing a real traction in late 2020. The vision behind it was that we want to understand the business story and get real personal with business, because every business has a story. Look, not everybody has perfect finances when they're starting out or they have lower revenue. It's a struggle for businesses. So we want to know what's going on with the business so we can provide the best match for them. And so not only do we broker deals, we have in-house funding, which makes us a lot more flexible than our competitors. We can actually provide funds anywhere. As long as the business has financials that meet our criteria, we're happy to help businesses moving forward. And I think our customers love us. Our reviews are great. Our Google reviews are astounding, and we do great service here.
Fantastic. So one thing that you just said that I want to ask about, you said you can do financing anywhere. Is that any vertical, or literally you have clients in Houston, in Canada, in anywhere in the United States and other countries, or where are you at from that perspective?
In the United States, as far as geographically, United States is our target. We used to do Canada deals, but that's it's starting to crack down a little more on what we can do internationally.
Sure.
US is the easiest to work with, but we can do nationwide, anywhere in the nation. Certain states have certain laws that make it a little more difficult, but we can still get it done. We will work with certain partners that will be able to get done in like California or other states. But yeah, we can do it anywhere. And really, as long as you're available to receive funds, we can give it to you.
Okay, perfect. So the thing that you said before was the fact that the beginning of 2020 was a bit of a challenge, and then you started to see a ramp up towards the end of 2020, and it's just been a ramp up since then. So what do you attribute your growth to the most?
Well, a big part of our growth over the past couple years has really been about people and really focusing on the people strategy. Look, I mean, we can put processes in place all day, but if you don't have people to run the process, you really run into a problem, right? So having a system built around people and getting the right people on board was one of the biggest changes to our business. There was a hard decision. There was a crossroads we ran into, and I think a lot of small business owners can relate to this, where you have a type of person that may be performing in your company and they're delivering revenue, especially if you're running a sales-oriented organization, and you're reluctant to fire them because they're not good for your culture, but they produce revenue.
Mhm.
And we made a hard call. We decided to remove team members that were toxic to our environment, despite how much revenue they were bringing in. And we immediately suffered from that right off the bat, for a month too, and then we started seeing double growth. So we were like, okay, we learned from that, and look, it was scary. I mean, look, there's fear associated with making that kind of call, right? It's like these guys are
Yeah.
bringing in money, we're reluctant to get rid of them. Look, the best piece of advice I can give anybody is like, get rid of your toxic A players, the people who are toxic to your workplace. Like, really hire on your values and don't ever like circumvent that. That's, to me, is first and foremost. Hire on people that fit your culture.
It's funny that you say that, because one of the things as coaches we talk about a lot is, sometimes you have to fire a client, and they may be a larger client and you don't want to necessarily get rid of that. Well, you never want to get rid of that revenue. But at the same time, if they're costing you revenue because you're focusing too much time, or you're not able to get traction with other clients because of it, and sometimes you have to make that choice. And having a business, it's very similar. You certainly don't want to lose top revenue earners, but then you do have to ask yourself, how many of your not top revenue performers could be top revenue performers if not for the toxic environment that is there? So it absolutely makes sense. So from that perspective, what has been one of your biggest learnings as an employer since you started the business?
It's funny you say learnings, because I get caught up in that word. There's a difference between knowing something and understanding something, right?
Mhm.
It's like you can innately read something and know that, like, everybody's default is like, hey, yeah, I knew that already, or I know it, right? And
Mhm.
whereas, you don't know it until you can just do it. And
Mhm.
so that's where I call the understanding phrase is like, look, this is a genuine understanding, and it's part of the ethos of our culture. So one of the top learnings is like the Pareto principle. As you mentioned with the customer database, we did that first before we even did with the employees. We were like, okay, who are the bottom percentage of customers that we didn't want anymore, the people that were a
Mhm.
pain in the ass. And we were like, let's get rid of these people. Well, they're costing us way too much. Yeah, they're bringing in revenue, but like, look, if we focus our efforts on the customers that bring us the most deals, we can outperform in the marketplace. And we did that, and it made a huge impact on our business in a good
Mhm.
way. We went from, small growth to bigger growth. And as a company grows, it's harder to get, double digits in growth. And we went from, 15, 20% to 60% after doing that. And then we were like, okay. And later we ran into personnel problems. We were like, why don't we just go back to what we know? Let's cut the crap and move forward and cut the toxic players. And that really changed our workplace. And the hiring became so much more. It was such a game changer for us having the right people in here. It was really
Very
well.
cool. Very cool. So you mentioned at the very beginning of the interview your love for learning and the concept of consistently learning. There's the third law of thermodynamics is, if you're not growing, you're dying. And I think that is very applicable. From that perspective, what do you feel is one of the most influential books that you've read, either ever or most recently?
I mean, I always go back. This is really hard. I mean, I probably read 100 books a year, and so it's really hard to pick one. I think it's like you hear the same thing in 100 different ways, and then it
Mm.
finally just like, okay, it clicks. I mean, the first book that had the impact on me was The Slight Edge. It's The Little Decisions Go a Long Way, right? It's by Jeff Olson. And then I had another version of that book written by Darren Hardy, and that was called, The Compound Effect, basically the same concept. And that book really kind of kicked me off. And a lot of like, okay, I'm making a bunch of little wrong decisions, which you look at the impact and you go, hey, look, oh my God, like, how did I get here? Well, it wasn't
Yeah.
that last decision you made. It was all the decisions before that that led to that point.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, so you got to go back and go, what are the micro decisions I'm making that are causing this? And then I had to look at that in the culture sense too. Like, what are the micro cultural, shortcuts that I'm making that's affecting our company's culture? And we had to make that shift. So those books had a big impact on me. More than recently, I went heavy into like Jim Collins stuff. I've read Jim Collins plenty of times, but I had to go back and I go, okay, I'm trying to build a world-class company here. I'm not trying to build just a company.
Yeah.
And I definitely don't want to just build a job that everybody's going to be in for the next 15, 20 years. I said, okay, how do we turn this to world class? So I went back to Jim Collins, and I think the fundamental Jim Collins book is From Good to Great. And then there's obviously a series of books after that he wrote that all kind of spin off the same core ideas. But between that and Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, we went really dug into execution. I was sitting in a room with the other partners of the business, and we all rated how our execution was, and I was the one that rated our execution the lowest. I said, we're not executing. And of course they're like, what do you mean? And I said, well, look, we don't have a strategy that we're executing. We're good at pivoting.
Yeah.
We're good at making tactics. So the long answer to your question is that I really dug into EOS methodology. So that is, the executive or elite operating system. And it's really about like setting goals and being consistent and holding people accountable, because I realized our organization didn't have accountability.
Okay.
And we need to build accountability in it.
Perfect. So let's switch gears just a little bit. Before we started the recording, you and I chatted for a little bit. You mentioned my term, not yours, serial entrepreneur. You've started multiple businesses. You've been the forefront of multiple businesses. I would suspect that now time management is probably not a problem for you, but when you first started, I have to assume, like everybody, that time management is a problem for anybody. You don't know when to put work away and start life, or put personal life away and start, and it's just a challenge. So how have you overcome, or what do you do on a daily basis to overcome time management and keep time management an innate top priority for yourself?
It's pretty simple in theory. I think it's harder to practice for people, but time management has always been like, what is going to produce the most amount of revenue and what is going to have the biggest impact. I can put a series of 100 different things, and I like look at it and go, what is the biggest most impactful thing I can do? And what is the only most impactful thing that only I can do? So the problem is we take on too many tasks, and a lot of those tasks don't actually add to the results. So instead you go, okay, look at everything that you can do, and then only you can do. You can break that out, and then you go, okay, well, what are the only things that only I can do, and what can actually impact revenue? This took a long time to learn, though. This wasn't something, it was like 15 years ago, it was like, I'll just do everything myself. I just thought I could outwork everybody. And then it's like, I didn't delegate, and then you learn how to delegate. If I am the only one that knows how to do it, those are things I can't delegate. If somebody can do it 80%, I could probably delegate that. But if somebody's only 5%, then probably can't delegate.
Right. No, absolutely makes sense. I think, along those lines, oftentimes as leaders of businesses, we forget our actual dollar value. So if you take your salary and divide it by 2,095, that's the number of hours in a work year. If your hourly rate is, say, $150 an hour, are you the best person to be sweeping the floors for $150 an hour? Probably not.
Right.
Trying to figure that out is important. So
I do that all the time too. I always remind myself, like, hey, like, what's your rate? What's your going rate? And if you're doing a task that you could pay somebody to do that's less than that rate, then you need to do that, or you can delegate that. So I'm really driven by delegation. I find myself, there was a series of steps. The first step was like, do everything yourself. The second step was like, okay, great. What can I delegate? And then eventually got to the point that I'm like delegating everything almost, because it's like, I'm not the only one that knows how to do this anymore. So,
yeah. And I think, so let's talk about that for a little bit, because I think with delegation, there are people that delegate, and I will say delegate poorly because they don't communicate correctly. They don't communicate what their expectations are in what they're handing off. So how have you managed, or how do you manage through the delegation process, so that way you're happy with what the outcome is when it comes back?
Well, I think it boils down to getting the team aligned on the same page. What are we trying to accomplish here? I think people get caught up in too much in the how. Like, I want you to do it this way. Well, the way doesn't really matter as long as you attain the result. I say done's better than perfect, right? So it's really, really important that what is the end result we wish to accomplish? And as long as they have that end result in mind, to allow people to be creative in the way they approach that. Now, if I have a better recommendation or something that will save them a lot of time, I'll generally ask, like, hey, do you mind if I make a recommendation?
Mhm.
Sure. And they never say no. They want things to help them save time, right? But I think challenging people is really important. Giving them challenge to something to really sink their teeth into is a big part of it. So the answer to your question for me is like, I've really just found out that just setting that expectation right up front, like, and saying like, my expectation is that this will be completed in a week. Are you able to commit to that? And my expectation is this outcome. Are you able to determine and accomplish this? Right. So it really goes back to the goal setting we mentioned earlier, is really setting the expectation right up front. And if anything happens, like you're unable to meet that, look, I get it. Sometimes we fail. Just let me know ahead of time. Right. Like if you're not able to make it, let me know ahead of time.
Okay, perfect. Switching gears, what advice would you give to a new business owner regarding managing finance? So this one is a unique question for you because this is really your realm, what you're in right now. I think that a lot of times new business owners don't understand the financial requirements or the things that they're going to be doing from a finance perspective. So what are some of the things that you would recommend from a management of finances perspective, or red flags that they should be looking for to know what's going well or not going well?
Yeah, I think one of them, and this is not really related to what I do here per se, but I think with my experience working with other entrepreneurs, very common that it's always about what technology we can put in. Technology can be a company's second biggest expense along with payroll.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's like, oh, I need to buy this platform. I need to buy that platform. I need to buy this. And people get too wrapped up in the next shiny thing. And they
Mm-hmm.
really don't focus on execution. How are we able to leverage and utilize that technology to bring the result we want before you jump onto another piece of technology? And so I feel like that is a huge mistake that people make. And the second one is, don't be afraid of paying the right person more than market. They will deliver more results. Like, be afraid of buying more technology. Don't be afraid of getting the right person in.
Sure.
So technology is used to support talent, not the other way around. Talent supports great technology. I don't agree with that.
Perfect. Last question. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Well, I mean, I'm going to always, I love working. I love providing value through business. I think a good business provides value and helps people. So I'll be in business. Ideally Moby Capital has grown, 5 to 10 times, but in 5 years, as it's the bigger the business, the harder it is to maintain like high growth rates. We're not in tech, but we are in finance. So growth rates are seen pretty astronomically in this industry as well. I will be also owning other entrepreneurial ventures. I'll probably pop back on YouTube. I had a YouTube channel back in the day that I ran, and it was rather successful considering the niche market. I might pop back on there and do a little bit of consulting and work with entrepreneurs. But ideally, the kind of an interim goal is really angel investing, helping entrepreneurs start businesses. And I'm actively looking for opportunities to angel invest in now. But I bet on the jockey and not the horse. I need to find the right person. It's not about the business as it is about the person.
Sure. Okay, perfect. Chad, it's been great. I greatly appreciate appreciate your insights and the thoughts you've provided. And I'll be checking back with you shortly to see how everything's going for you guys.
Travis, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Chad. Have a great day.